One of the hardest feelings in my inner world that I had to really cope with was the feeling of not belonging to anyone, to anywhere, to be abandoned. I grew up in a broken family. Both of my parents grew up in broken families too. They weren't ready for what is coming because my mother was very, very young.
Catalin's mother was just 17 years old when she became pregnant in Romania. She was in a relationship with an alcoholic and abusive man and felt she had no choice but to leave him and send her son to an orphanage.
Sometimes I would wish to not be born, or I would wish, to stop living, because the suffering was so deep and so great.
At such a tender age, living in a Romanian orphanage was tough. The younger children were often victimized by the older ones there.
They will steal your desserts. If an older guy wants to train, you have to freeze, become a punching box, and he will punch you and kick you.
Whilst going through this abuse, Catalin had no one to protect him. But that was not the only issue he faced at the orphanage. Overcrowded facilities also meant a lack of quality food.
I remember once that I grabbed a toast, and because the bread was so old and so hard, one of my teeth fell. One of the hardest feelings in my inner world that I had to really cope with was the feeling of not belonging to anyone. To be abandoned, the suffering and the pain were so great that it's very hard to see any purpose of continuing to be on this earth.
As Catalin grew a bit older, he started to question his existence, and amidst a lot of questions, he decided to pay a visit to his mother. He didn't know that what his mother would tell him would completely shatter him.
When I got pregnant with you, I wouldn't ruin my life having you. So I ran from your father, who was an alcoholic and abusive man, to my mother, climbed up a high tree and jumped down, and she started to laugh. For a second, I was a bit confused, and then I realized that what she was trying to say was that I've tried to kill you, because the pressure and the impact with the ground can kill the baby inside.
Catalin couldn't comprehend what he heard from his mother, but knew that rejection had set in before he was even born.
I was feeling lost. I was feeling in a deep pit with no one around to protect me, with no one around to care for me or to love me.
Whilst Catalin was going through these struggles, one day the child services decided to place him at a relative's house, not knowing how he would be treated there.
Very poor life conditions, no water, no electricity, no heat during the winter. Sometimes food was very limited, and more than that, she would be very abusive with me mentally, emotionally, physically.
Catalin's auntie didn't want him there and would often kick him out of the house, but Catalin kept going back as he had nowhere else to turn, until one day, when it happened again, Catalin didn't want to return. So he went to a nearby church that he had been visiting. When they came to know about Catalin's misery, they invited him to stay there.
So that was the context where God started to heal my heart or to change my heart. Going to church started to become for me my refuge.
For the first time in years, Catalin felt loved. He knew these people were different from the others.
I realized that God is shaping my heart, and it became clear that my purpose in life is to inspire others by telling my story. Because this church accepted a stranger to love and care about, it helped me to realize the power of love, and I decided to follow Jesus for the rest of my life.
As Catalin accepted Jesus into his life, the word of God started to comfort him. Then one day, whilst he was reading his Bible, he read something that moved him to tears.
Can a mother forget her nursing child and have no love for the child she has born? Though she might forget, I will never forget you. I started to feel the deep love of our Creator, that His intention for me wasn't to be abandoned. But even if that happened in a sinful world, He will never forget me. Despite my suffering, I started to feel the love of God.
As Catalin learned more about God and His unconditional love, he also understood the importance of forgiveness that the Bible teaches.
And if God offers us every single day chances to come back to Him, who am I to not forgive my parents? And that's why I forgave them in my heart.
God has worked powerfully in Catalin's life, and today Catalin works for Barnabas Aid. And through his experiences and suffering, he is passionate about advocating for suffering Christians around the world. God has turned his pain and tears around and enabled Catalin to serve the Lord through these experiences.
If you are watching my story today and you are suffering, I want to deeply encourage you to don't give up, to put your hope in God. The way my mother wanted to kill me and I didn't die that day when she tried to jump from the tree, because God had a purpose for my life. I can assure you that God has a purpose for your life too, because that's the power of God's overflowing, deep and everlasting love.